The way that we teach about scientific research characteristics is often wrong. The way that we go about of encouraging kids to think about the scientific method is that it's a method that you do a step-by-step fashion. I want to talk about this. I'm going to tell you a totally different view that I think is going to revolutionize the way that you think about science, and then all of the implications that you are going to get from it are totally different than the way that you currently think about this at this moment. So there's this scientific method that we often teach and we think about, right? So that is thinking about a particular theory, testing hypothesis from this theory with real world data, gathering some inferences from this data, and then from the insights that you actually get, and then telling other people. That's the basic story of the scientific research method process. Now, there is kind of a variant of this that a lot of people talk about, and that is coming up with reliable and valid understanding of the world, that there is one particular true way of thinking about things, one particular thing that you can think about, and then what you have to do is that you have to come up with consistent results repeatedly by making inferences about this particular thing, and then studying it from different angles, getting data from different angles, and then coming up with one true understanding of the way that the world actually works. Both of those are pretty good ways of thinking about the scientific or characteristics of the scientific research process, or how things actually are done, but they're not quite right, in my view. And I think a lot of people would agree with me that are in the profession. I am actually a professor, associate professor. I do a lot of research, and I kind of study from time to time the actual scientific research process. I teach research methods at the PhD level, a lot of sort of different, indicators to tell you that, yeah, I kind of understand this stuff a little bit. But what I want to point out, instead of thinking about it in this sort of dry fashion, I want you to think about it as a process of defending yourself against other people that doubt you. And the first time that you come up with something, and this is a lot more what actually scientists and researchers go through, is that you will come up with an idea, and your idea will be doubted by absolutely everybody that's in the scientific research community. And it's your job to defend against all of that doubt. So first of all, yourself should be doubtful of those things that you're thinking about, right? But that's hard to do. We know that we're human beings, and we have this little bit of a weird problem when we do that, because we have to come up with the idea and then, and sort of make cases for this particular idea, but then we have to sort of defend against it or try to negate it. And that's hard to do mentally. It's very difficult to do. We have to sort of separate two minds in our head. Instead, a better way to think about this is other people throwing heat or smoke at you, right? Like discrediting everything about you. So they're going to discredit all characteristics of the idea, and then they're also going to try to discredit the individual themselves, right? Like deconstruct everything in terms of what this particular person is proposing and what they're trying to do. And so it's your job is to build legitimacy and status that matters, right? Like where people can think about this particular thing, not only your ideas, but also the individual, the scientist, the researcher that's actually proposing it, and that legitimacy and status actually really, really matters, right? So if you are a well-known researcher, a well-known scientist, scholar, and you propose kind of a little bit of a quack idea, people are not they're gonna discredit you, and then you kind of get removed from the profession, right? Like people just do not pay attention to what you're actually saying. Now, you can also propose a whacked out idea, right? That's a little unusual, and it takes you 30 years to defend that idea. But as you do it, people start seeing what you're actually doing, then it makes sense, right? But it is this process of actually coming about and defending yourself against the ideas that you actually have, and defending the ideas that you actually propose against all of the different things. And so you might actually have an idea that is really different, that is highly unusual, that people discredit for a long time, that all of a sudden, because of something that happens in the social environment, it changes. And people start thinking about this particular idea. So instead of thinking of there's like this sort of truthfulness, this sort of validity and reliability, and a single idea about how the world works, which is a very strong assumption, by the way, that we understand that there is a true world. And I know that sounds really difficult, but a lot of people have challenges with this, that there is this sort of singular world that we're trying to find. But instead, you might want to think about, I have an idea, and I have to defend myself. I have to stand up, and people are going to throw smoke at me. How am I going to do that using sort of legitimate ways of thinking about this particular problem? And now the legitimate ways of thinking within the language, the dialogue of the scientific community might be, gathering data, or getting insight from other scientists, all of these sort of different things. In a way, it's kind of like being a very good investigative or journalist, but to a higher level, because there is a very small audience of people that are far more skeptical than the general public, right? So think of yourself as an investigative journalist with very, very sharp, some of the best minds in the world, but that doesn't say much, right? There's some of the best minds in the world that are going to discredit and throw smoke at you. And it's your job to think about, how do I anticipate and think about what people are going to say? How do I defend myself? How do I build that legitimacy, both in the idea and myself as well? And if you get those two things down, and that's a hard thing, that's not easy, right? That requires you to do a great deal of work, not only building and defending your idea, but also a lot of goodwill that happens a lot. That you have to build this idea so that people start believing what you're actually doing. And so you can be that one scientist and researcher that gets a lot of fanfare at the beginning because you have a really sharp idea, or you can build your career where by the time that 40 years down the road, that people start recognizing what you're actually saying and what you're trying to do. And that is a challenging thing for all of us to accept, that the stuff that happens today matters tomorrow, and we build this particular career as we go, but we have to start thinking about those particular ways of doing things. It's not about building and finding a truth, one single truth, but it's about creating ideas that people think are curious and interesting, and that, there is some validity there. And depending on how you look at the world, that it actually makes sense. So these characteristics of the scientific research process are totally different than what you're thinking about, and totally different than what is taught often to elementary school kids. It's not quite right. It's not quite the process. And we know this. We need to actually start teaching about the fact that it is about doubting other people. And it's about it's being very critical of other people and what their ideas actually represent, and coming down and trying to think about what it actually means to have that particular idea, and how to defend yourself against all of the critiques that people can throw at you. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.